My name is Bella. I'm 34 years old, a lab technician working at a private medical center in Oregon. My day starts at 6 a.m. I drop off my 6-year-old daughter Ellie at the elementary school near our house, then head to the lab to face trays of blood, urine, and nameless analysis forms. It's not a glamorous job, but I love it, because I see my value in precision, quiet diligence, and consistency. Ellie is the one thing I'm most proud of in my life. She has her father's soft brown curls and my green eyes, always full of light. Every afternoon after work, I try to pick her up myself instead of letting the school bus bring her home. That moment, when she runs to me, arms wide, eager to show me a drawing or a new song from music class, is when I feel most like a mother. My husband, Dean, used to be the man I believed was my soulmate. He works in real estate, often traveling to oversee new housing developments in distant suburbs. Dean used to be gentle, warm, and driven, but lately I've felt him pulling away. He's been coming home late, blaming last-minute client meetings on weekends we could have spent together as a family. Every time Ellie runs to him with a picture, he just nods absent-mindedly and looks back at his phone. Sometimes I feel like I'm just the maid in my own home. My parents, Walter and Nora, live just about a 20-minute drive away. They're retired now, living in a cabin by Crescent Lake. I've always believed their love for Ellie was genuine. They'd bake cookies, turn on cartoons, and sit for hours listening to her school stories. But recently, something has shifted in the way my mom looks at Ellie. It's not exactly cold, but cautious. Like Ellie is something she'd rather not touch. My older sister, Vanessa, is the complete opposite. She's 5 years older than me, was prom queen in high school, and now works as a marketing director for a major cosmetics company in Seattle. Vanessa never married, has no children, and often jokes that I live like an old lady. Still, she never misses a family dinner, always dressed to impress, casually talking about her business trips to Paris or Milan like it's no big deal. 2 weeks ago at dinner, just as we were gathering around Dad's grilled ribs, Vanessa made a strange suggestion. Have you ever thought Ellie might do better somewhere else? Like Seattle? Great private schools. She could stay with me for a few months. I stared at her, stunned. What are you talking about? She's only 6. And I'm her mother. Vanessa smiled, but it didn't warm me like it used to. I'm just thinking about her future. You're busy, Dean's always away. I just want to help. I didn't respond. But that night, lying next to a sleeping Ellie, a strange unease took over me. Dean's late nights, my mom's strange looks, Vanessa's words. They were like puzzle pieces, scattered, but slowly forming a picture I didn't want to see. The next morning, while I was washing Ellie's hair in the bathroom, she looked up at me and asked, "Mom, if one day I don't live with you anymore, will you be sad?" My heart stopped. "Who told you that?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Grandma's friend's granddaughter said so, that I'll go to a faraway school and live with someone named V." She didn't finish, but I already knew the name. Vanessa. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of something bigger. A plan that had been in motion for a while. A plan where Ellie was the centerpiece. 3 days after Ellie asked that strange question, Dean came home after 10 p.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table, lights still on, dinner cold. He walked in, hung up his coat, and said the line I could now recite in my head. "Sorry, a client extended the meeting again." I didn't ask anything. I got up, served him dinner, and sat back down. I didn't want to fight. Not because I was weak, but because sometimes silence is the only way to hear what people are hiding. Dean ate without a word, eyes glued to his phone. At one point, he turned away while texting, and for a split second, I saw a name flash in the reflection on the glass cabinet. "V, call back." "Vanessa?" The name froze me. I couldn't be certain, but my instincts, as a mother, as a wife, told me something was very wrong. The next day, when I picked up Ellie, her teacher told me something that made me freeze. Ellie said she had trouble sleeping. She mentioned someone told her she might have to move and live away from you. "Bella, is everything okay?" I forced a reassuring smile, thanked her, and rushed Ellie home. But my mind was racing. I didn't tell Dean. Instead, I called my mom. Mom, has Vanessa said anything about Ellie lately? There was a long pause before she replied. She's just been talking about the future, Bella. She thinks Ellie deserves a better school. But no one has the right to talk about her future except me, I said, unable to hide my frustration. My mom sighed. Bella, you're a good mom, but you're stretched thin. Dean's always working, and Vanessa, she's just trying to help. Help. I was starting to hate that word. 2 days later, Vanessa dropped by around lunchtime. I had just gotten back from the lab. Dean was meeting a client. Vanessa brought 2 lattes and a bag with kids' clothes. I went shopping, she smiled, setting the bag down. I thought Ellie would love this purple dress. I didn't touch the coffee or open the bag. I looked her in the eyes. What are you doing, Vanessa? She blinked, then gave a light laugh. What? I'm just bringing gifts for my niece. And trying to convince everyone that she should live with you, away from her own mother. Is that what you're doing? Vanessa set her cup down harder than usual, but kept her voice smooth. Bella, you're overreacting. Do you know how much pressure Dean is under? Mom and Dad worry too. We all just want what's best for Ellie. What's best is for her to stay with her mother. A crooked smile flickered across Vanessa's face. Not the sister I used to know. That smile chilled me. If you think being a mother means you get to decide everything, you're mistaken. Children aren't property. That night, I found an unopened envelope in Dean's coat pocket. It was from a law firm in Seattle. Inside, documents about child custody consultation and a draft agreement for temporary guardianship transfer. I sat alone in the living room. The house was so silent I could hear the clock ticking. Only one question echoed in my head. How are they planning to take my daughter away from me? Ellie was asleep in her room, clutching her stuffed bunny like always. But this time, I couldn't calmly watch her sleep the way I used to. A storm was coming. And it wasn't from the outside, but from the very people who shared my blood. I knew I couldn't stay still anymore, because I wasn't just protecting Ellie from a plan. I was protecting her from a world I once believed was family. That Saturday, my mom called, her voice full of cheer. Bella, this weekend we're planning a picnic at Crater Ridge National Park. It's not too far, just about a 2-hour drive. We'll all hike along a little creek and watch the leaves fall. Ellie's going to love it. I didn't even have time to respond before she added, Vanessa's coming too. Your dad's already packed lunch. You just need to get yourself and Ellie ready. I paused for a few seconds, feeling something off. My family was never the outdoorsy type, and they definitely didn't plan last-minute outings in the chilly fall. But then Ellie jumped up on the chair, having overheard, and shouted, Mom, I want to go. I'll bring my magnifying glass. Maybe I'll find a rare red leaf. I smiled and patted her head. How could I say no when her eyes sparkled like that? That night, I told Dean about the trip. He closed his laptop, slightly frowning. Saturday? I've got a site visit with a new investor. Probably won't make it. I wasn't surprised. These meetings had been showing up as often as fallen leaves. I nodded. Then I'll take Ellie. But Dean, do you feel like something's changed in our family? He was quiet for a moment, then said, You're probably just overthinking. Either way, some fresh air might do you good. Saturday morning, I woke up early and packed sandwiches, fruit, water, and even a few bandages. I always carry a first aid kit on trips like this. My job has made me cautious by habit. Ellie wore her green beanie and showed off the tiny magnifying glass hanging around her neck. She was genuinely excited. My parents' car arrived on time. Dad was driving, Mom in the passenger seat, and Vanessa in the back, next to Ellie and me. Vanessa wore a trendy athletic outfit and expensive hiking shoes. Odd, considering I'd never seen her go on a hike before. But I didn't ask. I just observed. The weather was crisp, sunlight filtering softly through the trees. We walked along winding trails, eventually reaching a narrow dirt path into a sparse forest. Dad said, This is a newer route, not many people know about it. The view is amazing. I felt uneasy. This path didn't match any of the old routes we used to take when I was a kid. Still, I said nothing. Ellie chattered beside me, pointing at every branch. Mom, this leaf looks like a heart. Vanessa occasionally glanced at me over her sunglasses. Each time I caught her, she turned away, pretending to check her phone. When I asked, "Texting someone?" She paused for a second, then smiled. "Just checking the weather, signal's bad up here." Then my mom chimed in. "Today's going to be a special day, Bella, one you'll never forget." Even though she was smiling, her words made my skin crawl. My dad kept checking the rearview mirror, his eyes flicking from me and Ellie to the winding road ahead. We stopped at an open clearing near the edge of a gentle slope. In the distance, a valley of pine trees spread out, dotted with orange and red leaves. The breeze was light, the air clean, but my unease wouldn't go away. Dad parked the car, turned off the engine, and said, "From here, it's about a 20-minute walk to this cliff with a breathtaking view. No one in the family's been there yet." I slung the backpack over my shoulder, held Ellie's hand, and followed them. As we entered a denser patch of trees, Vanessa fell back to walk beside me and suddenly asked, "Have you ever thought about sending Ellie to boarding school?" I stopped cold. That question wasn't random. "No, and I have no plans to." Vanessa shrugged. "There are some things you can't control forever, Bella. Life changes fast." It didn't sound threatening, but it made my skin prickle. Just then, Ellie ran ahead, then turned back and called out, "Mom, there's a high spot up here. You can see the whole mountain." Before I could answer, my parents and Vanessa had already moved toward the edge of the cliff. That's when I realized none of them had brought much. Just a few water bottles, no blankets, no food, no maps, not even a compass. I gripped Ellie's hand tighter, feeling my heart pounding. And then I saw my mother give Vanessa a signal with her eyes. I slowed down, pulling Ellie closer as we neared the edge. From here, the entire Crater Ridge Valley came into view, sunlight slicing through distant trees. It was peaceful. Eerily so, like nature itself was trying to distract me. Dad stood right at the edge, pointing out ahead. "See that, Bella? If we go just a bit further, there's another ledge that sticks out. The view from there is incredible. I went once." I nodded faintly, but my eyes never left Mom's hand, tight around her nearly empty backpack. Vanessa stepped closer, then placed a hand on my shoulder, giving it a light squeeze. "Ever wonder if life could be easier, Bella?" I turned to her, my eyes filled with suspicion. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer right away, just smiled, and that smile, once familiar, now held nothing warm. Then suddenly she reached for my arm. I recoiled, instinctively pulling Ellie back. "Get your hand off me, Vanessa." "Bella, I need to show you something. Just for a second." Before she could finish, my dad stepped toward Ellie. She looked up and smiled. "Grandpa, did you see the eagle?" "Of course, sweetheart. Come here, I'll show you." He bent down, lifted her in his arms, and began walking toward the edge. It all happened in seconds, but to me it felt like time stopped. I screamed, "Stop, put her down." But before I could lunge forward, my mother shoved me hard from behind. The force sent me stumbling, my foot slipping on the uneven ground. I nearly lost my balance, my hands flailing until one managed to grip a small branch growing along the cliff's edge. Vanessa stepped closer, her face ice cold. Her voice dropped low. "I'm sorry, Bella, but this is necessary. It'll be over quickly." I struggled to stay upright, heart pounding, my eyes locked on Ellie writhing in my father's arms. "Dad, put her down. She's your granddaughter." But he didn't flinch. In fact, his expression was calm. Eerily so. "She won't remember any of this. It'll be over soon, Bella. For both of you." Panic exploded in my chest. I didn't need more proof. This wasn't some staged accident. This was a plan, a carefully orchestrated plot. with Ellie and me as the targets. In a split second, I threw myself forward, hurling my body into the air. As my hands reached Ellie's dangling legs, I pulled her toward me with every ounce of strength I had left. My father lost his balance, stumbled, and I completely lost my footing. Everything after that was wind roaring in my ears and the blue sky spinning. I wrapped my arms tightly around Ellie, curling myself around her like a living shield. She screamed into the wind. "Mommy!" I didn't answer. I just held her close, as if somehow a mother's love could slow the fall. We hit tree branches, slammed against jagged rocks. Pain burst through my shoulder, my back, my legs. I couldn't tell where I was injured. I just knew I still had Ellie in my arms. When we finally landed on damp earth at the bottom of the cliff, I felt blood running from my forehead into my eyes, blurring everything. But Ellie was still in my arms. Her tiny body trembled. But she was alive. I whispered, barely audible. "Are you okay, Ellie? Mommy?" "I'm scared." I couldn't say anything more. Darkness swept over me. But I knew I had to stay awake. I had to survive. Because I wasn't just a mother. I was Ellie's only anchor left in this world. They couldn't stop me from falling, but I wouldn't let them bury the truth. Pain screamed through my body, locking me in place. My left eye was swollen shut, my head spinning. My left wrist felt broken, and I couldn't feel my right leg. The smell of blood mixed with damp soil filled my nose. I was still cradling Ellie, her faint breath warm against my neck. I slowly opened my eyes, careful not to move too much. Trees loomed above us, their branches filtering in pale light. The air was unnervingly silent. I swallowed hard and turned my head. Ellie was staring at me, eyes brimming with tears. She whispered, her voice tight. "Mom, are we gonna die?" I shook my head, even though the motion sent a jolt of pain through my shoulder. "No, I'm here with you, and we're going to live." Ellie trembled, then buried her face into my chest. We lay still like that for a while, until I heard faint voices above us. Whispers from the cliff top. "Do you see anything?" My mother's voice. "No, not moving," my father replied, flatly. "Good. No one comes out here. No one's going to find them." Vanessa's voice sounded relieved, but also oddly unsure. I quickly pressed my hand over Ellie's mouth, signaling her to stay quiet. She nodded immediately, tucking her face into my shirt. "Let's go." "If they're alive, they're not getting out of here anyway," my mom added. I held my breath, heart pounding as their footsteps faded into the distance. When I was sure they were gone, I loosened my hand. Ellie looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, what if they come back and find out we're alive? Maybe we should pretend we're not." I stared at her, speechless. She was only 6, yet somehow she understood just how dangerous this was. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, let's stay still for a little longer, okay?" She nodded. I pulled her close, shut my eyes, and kept our bodies as still as possible. Time stopped in that forest. Only the sound of wind and the distant call of birds. I listened to every beat of her small heart beside mine, while anger slowly spread through my veins. Not from the fall, but from the betrayal. My parents. Vanessa. The man I once loved. All of them had joined forces to plan this, to eliminate us like we were just obstacles. After a while, Ellie lifted her head. Her eyes were teary but clear. "Mom, I think I know what they're doing." "What do you mean, Ellie?" I whispered back. "I heard Aunt Vanessa talking to Dad when I was playing hide-and-seek in the garden. I was hiding behind the rose bushes. She said, 'It'll all be over soon, we just need Bella to agree to the picnic.' Dad said, 'Just do what we planned, the insurance money's coming.'" I froze. It felt like someone punched me in the chest. They hadn't just wanted us gone. They had counted on the life insurance. "I didn't tell you before because I thought they were joking. I'm sorry." I hugged her tightly, forcing my voice to stay steady. It's okay, Ellie, you've been so brave. I'm proud of you. I checked the backpack. Most of our supplies had flown out during the fall, but thankfully there was a dry towel and 1 bottle of water left. I cleaned the scrape on Ellie's cheek before turning to assess my leg. The pain shot through me when I tried to lift my right leg. It nearly made me black out. I bit down hard, drawing blood to keep from crying out. It felt broken. My left wrist was badly swollen, barely usable, but I still had my right hand, my mind, and I had Ellie. We needed rescue. But my phone, if it had survived, was probably smashed or lost somewhere on the steep slope. I turned to Ellie. I can't walk fast, but you can. You might be able to find the path back, but only if it's really safe, okay? Ellie shook her head immediately, eyes filling with tears. No! I'm not leaving you alone. I smiled faintly, my face pale from the pain. Then we'll go together. Little by little, I'll lean on you and we'll get out of here. Together. Ellie nodded firmly. I broke off a branch to use as a crutch, leaning on it and on my daughter as we began to inch away from danger. Every step was agony. But I didn't stop. Because I knew, once we made it out alive, the truth would come to light, and this time, no one, not even family, would be able to hide what they'd done. Ellie and I walked through the forest for 3 hours. Every step was a battle between blinding pain and the will to survive. There were moments I wanted to collapse right there and let it all end. But every time, Ellie held my hand and whispered, "Mommy, we're almost out." I gripped her hand tighter and kept going. By late afternoon, we were lucky enough to come across an elderly couple camping near a small creek. The woman, Mrs. Margaret, nearly jumped up when she saw me covered in blood and limping, while Ellie dropped to the ground, completely exhausted. "Can you hear me?" the man asked. I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. I can't talk. After that, everything became a haze. I barely remember the sound of sirens growing louder, Ellie's small hand wrapped tightly around mine, and her calm voice telling the paramedics that I had protected us. 3 days passed before I regained consciousness in a hospital room. My arm was in a cast, my leg propped up on pillows, and layers of bandages covered the cuts and bruises across my body. Ellie was curled up in a chair beside me, asleep, her tangled hair falling over the face I cherished more than anything. A man in civilian clothes sat quietly next to my bed. He carried the calm but firm demeanor of someone used to difficult conversations. Though his expression was serious, his eyes held a quiet kindness. He introduced himself as Detective Callahan from the Oakfield County Police Department and gently explained that he needed to ask me a few questions about what had happened. Despite the pain, I nodded and began recounting everything. Our family outing, Vanessa's strange behavior, and the terrifying fall that nearly ended my life. I spoke slowly but clearly, determined to leave out nothing. When I got to the part where Ellie overheard Dean and Vanessa talking, I saw Callahan pause, scribbling quickly into his notebook. "Your daughter remembered their conversation clearly?" I nodded. "She's incredibly sharp, and I trust everything she told me." He sat back slightly and said, "We've already started reviewing your husband's financial records, and there's something you need to be aware of." He reached into his case and pulled out a file, flipping it open to a highlighted page. 4 months ago, Dean updated your life insurance policy. He raised it to $3 million, stating it was for emergency family protection. He listed himself as the sole beneficiary. A cold chill crept down my spine. $3 million? He nodded gravely. "And the witness who signed the amendment? Your sister!" Vanessa G. Miller. My heart pounded, my head spinning with the realization. So they were in on it together, Dean and Vanessa. "Unfortunately, it goes deeper," Callahan said, cutting in. "We traced a bank transfer from your mother to Dean, made just 1 week before the incident. The memo line read, 'Final payment for the plan,' amounting to $500,000. My breath caught in my throat. My parents? They were part of it too? Callahan didn't look away. "I'm sorry, Bella. All signs point to a conspiracy involving your husband, your sister, and your parents. The messages we found suggest they'd been coordinating this plan for over 6 months, likely intending to silence both you and your daughter. The walls around me seemed to close in. The people I had trusted most, my family, had plotted my demise. After a moment, Callahan continued. We issued warrants for Dean and Vanessa immediately after you gave your statement. But when our team got to their locations, both had vanished. Dean's car was later found near a small, private airstrip. My stomach dropped. This wasn't over. I could feel it. Will you catch them? I asked, meeting his gaze. We've issued a federal warrant. In the meantime, I recommend that you and Ellie go into protective custody until we can ensure your safety, he said firmly. I looked at my daughter's sleeping face, still dotted with healing cuts, and felt a surge of strength rise within me. I was no longer the scared, broken woman who had fallen off a cliff. I had survived, and I would fight for justice. With everything I had. 3 days later, I was moved to a secure recovery room with law enforcement stationed just outside. Ellie was placed temporarily under the care of a social worker while the investigation deepened. When Callahan returned, he was holding a much thicker case file. His face was set with purpose. This wasn't just a case to him anymore. It was personal. We just got a hit from a toll booth camera 200 miles out. It captured Vanessa driving out of Oregon, likely heading toward Nevada. We've escalated the warrant to federal status. I gripped the edge of the bed, even though my wrist was still bandaged. What about Dean? Callahan flipped to another page. He's using an alias, but here's something interesting. When we checked flight history, we found he booked a private flight under the name Daniel Morrison. The departure time matches when they disappeared, but the flight was canceled at the last minute, possibly because he suspected we were onto him. I exhaled slowly. They weren't free yet. The next day, I was allowed to meet with a government-appointed attorney. During our first session, he confirmed, "We have complete financial records, your daughter's testimony, and recovered text messages between Dean and Vanessa from Dean's old phone, which the police found in his abandoned car. This case has enough evidence to charge them with attempted murder, conspiracy, and insurance fraud." Just then, the door opened. Ellie walked in with a female social worker. She ran over, throwing her arms around me, her face lighting up despite the bandages on her cheeks. "Mommy, I told Detective Callahan everything. I remember it all." I blinked in surprise. "You gave a statement?" Ellie nodded, then looked over at Callahan, who had entered behind her. He smiled. "This little girl is so sharp and composed. Our investigators were stunned." She recounted everything she heard. Vanessa's call with Dean, and even the conversation between Mrs. Nora and Mr. Walter about how everything would be fine if Bella just didn't push back. I looked at my daughter, torn between heartbreak and pride. She was only 6, yet she was the key to unraveling everything that had been hidden. "Were you scared?" I asked softly. Ellie shook her head. "No, I just thought, if I told the truth, then you wouldn't have to be scared anymore." I held my daughter tightly, feeling each tiny breath begin to steady against my chest. Everything wasn't over yet, but I knew we were finally heading in the right direction. 2 days later, the police found Dean hiding out in a small cash-only rental cabin on the edge of Nevada. They raided the place at dawn and arrested him while he was trying to burn papers and destroy his laptop. Vanessa was arrested later that afternoon at a roadside gas station. She'd been trying to swap vehicles through an off-the-record deal but was recognized by a security camera. That evening, Callahan gave a short update. "Both are in custody and being extradited back to Oregon. As for your parents, Walter and Nora, we've issued subpoenas. They were recorded in a call with Dean discussing a split agreement. It's undeniable." I looked out the hospital window, the late afternoon sun casting soft light through the trees. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. 3 days later, we were officially discharged, but the police advised that Ellie and I move into a secured witness protection residence until the trial. In a closed press briefing, police confirmed, Evidence confirms this was a coordinated murder plot to obtain a $3 million 0 cents life insurance payout. The 6-year-old girl is not only the sole surviving witness, but the key to uncovering the entire plan. I held Ellie's hand tightly as we watched the broadcast on TV. We were in an unfamiliar place, under 24/7 protection, but for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Because now the truth was finally on our side. 8 months after Ellie and I survived the fall at Crater Ridge, the trial of Dean, Vanessa, and my parents officially began at Oakfield County Courthouse. The whole small town buzzed with disbelief. No one could imagine that a seemingly perfect family was now facing charges of attempted murder. On the first day, I arrived in a wheelchair, my arm still in a brace from a fracture that hadn't fully healed. Ellie sat beside me, gripping my hand, wearing a sky blue dress she chose because it's Mommy's favorite color. I didn't cry, and I wasn't afraid. What I brought to court was the truth, and the unwavering strength of a mother who couldn't be broken by betrayal. Dean entered in a gray suit, expressionless. Vanessa followed, hair tied neatly, her eyes gliding past me like I was a stranger. My parents, Walter and Nora, kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I was used to that look. I'd grown up with it. The prosecutor opened with a sharp indictment, laying out detailed evidence of the murder plot, insurance fraud, and endangerment of a minor. Every fact cut like a knife, but I sat calmly. I had survived to expose this truth. I was called to testify on the second day. The courtroom was silent as I recounted everything. The trip, the fall, the unbearable pain, and the unforgivable betrayal. I didn't cry. My voice was steady. I looked Dean in the eye and said, "You didn't kill me, and you'll never get what you wanted. Because Ellie is not something you can trade for money." Vanessa kept her head down. She never once looked at me. That day, Ellie also testified, but through a pre-recorded video since she was still under child witness protection. In the video, her voice was small but clear. I heard Aunt Vanessa tell my dad that Mommy and I wouldn't be here anymore if everything went right. I was really scared, but I trusted Mommy. She protected me. She's a good person. No one in the courtroom could hold back tears, not even the judge. During their defense, Dean stood up, voice bitter and defensive. I was pushed into a corner. Bella wasn't the woman I once loved. She controlled everything. I just wanted freedom, to escape that suffocating life. Vanessa wasn't any softer. Bella always acted like she was right, the victim. But if she weren't around, Dean would have been happy. We just wanted to be free. I sat quietly. Their words no longer hurt me. In fact, they only revealed the depth of their guilt. It wasn't just murder they attempted. It was complete denial of accountability. When asked if they had any last words before sentencing, my parents said nothing about me or Ellie. My father only mumbled, "We just thought she didn't deserve that life." The judge struck the gavel 3 times. The air in the courtroom froze as the verdict was read. Defendants Dean Carter and Vanessa G. Miller are sentenced to 25 years in prison for first-degree attempted murder and are barred from contacting any witnesses post-Kalish. Defendants Walter and Nora G. Miller are sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and child endangerment. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding my whole life. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. Just relieved. Justice had finally spoken the names of the people who once called me daughter. After the trial, dozens of strangers approached me and Ellie, former neighbors, old friends, even people I'd never met, hugging us, offering words of support, saying, "You survived for all those who were too afraid to speak." I didn't say a word. I just leaned down, hugged Ellie close, and whispered in her ear, "We did it, Ellie. Now it's time to start truly living." After the trial, Ellie and I didn't return to our old home in Oregon. The police advised us to remain under witness protection until all threats were cleared, but I requested a transfer to somewhere far away. Somewhere without memories. somewhere no one knew our names, somewhere Ellie could start over. With help from my attorney and a domestic abuse survivor support group, I reconnected with an old friend, Grace, a high school classmate I hadn't spoken to in nearly 10 years. When she heard what had happened, she didn't ask for details. She just said over the phone, "Come here, stay as long as you need." Evergreen Valley, Colorado welcomed us on an early spring morning. The snow hadn't fully melted, but new buds were already pushing through the earth. Grace lived with her husband and 2 young kids in a cabin on the edge of the woods, about a 15-minute drive from town. The air was peaceful, strangely quiet, and for the first time in ages, I saw Ellie sleep through the night without waking up. I began working part-time at a small clinic downtown. Dr. Caroline, the owner, was an older woman, stern but compassionate. During our first meeting, she looked at me for a long moment, then said, "I don't need to know your past, but I see the caution in your eyes, and that's what patients need. If you're willing, you've got a job here." I nodded, unable to hide my gratitude. The work wasn't much, but it gave me rhythm again. The sound of blood pressure monitors, the click of drawers, the scent of antiseptic, these things gave me back a sense of control after so long drowning in chaos. Ellie was enrolled at a small elementary school just down the road from Grace's house. At first, she was shy, quiet, often sitting alone during recess. But just a few weeks in, her teacher called me and said, "Today, Ellie drew a picture of her family. It was of a little girl holding hands with a woman standing under the sun. When I asked, she said, 'That's me and my mom because we walked through a really dark night.'" I was silent for a long moment, eyes stinging. Then I simply said, "Thank you for telling me." Ellie and I began seeing a trauma therapist once a week. Her name was Dr. Helen Monroe, a specialist in working with survivors. She didn't ask direct questions. Instead, she let Ellie draw, play with sand, and describe her dreams in the simplest words. With me, she only said, "Don't force yourself to forgive. Focus on the one thing worth keeping: survival." Week by week, I watched Ellie begin to smile more. She started telling me stories from class, about how Jason spilled milk on his shirt and didn't cry, or how the teacher read books in a funny voice. Simple things, small things, but to me, they were proof she was becoming a child again. One Friday afternoon, I was cooking dinner with Grace in the warm kitchen when Ellie came running in, cheeks pink from the wind. "Mom, we're going on a field trip tomorrow. The teacher said you can come if you want." I looked at her and suddenly remembered myself in the forest, hands bloodied, back aching, never letting go of my daughter for even a second. I smiled. "Of course I'll come, you and me. We always go together." That night, after Ellie had fallen asleep, I stepped out onto the porch, leaning against the wooden railing, gazing up at a sky full of stars. I thought about everything I'd lost. A family that no longer felt like one, a marriage that once seemed perfect, and the people who had once called me daughter, sister. But then I thought about what I still had: a brave little girl, real friends, and a second chance, in a place where no one knew my name, and where I could live without fear. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I felt light. It happened naturally, as if everything had been quietly aligning without any of us noticing. The first person to strike up a conversation was Mr. David Clark, the principal at Ellie's school. I met him during a parent meeting, about 3 months after Ellie started school in Evergreen Valley. David was tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. He radiated patience and warmth, qualities I hadn't seen in a man for many years. After the meeting, he caught me in the hallway as I struggled to untangle Ellie's jacket from a door handle. "You're Ellie's mom, right? I'm David Clark, the principal. I just wanted to say, she's a wonderful student." I smiled, still a little guarded. "Thank you. She's trying really hard to catch up." He looked at me for a moment, then said gently, "You don't need to explain anything. Here, we don't care about anyone's past. All we care about is that today," Ellie smiled on the playground. After that day, I saw Mr. David more often when picking Ellie up. At first, we exchanged brief greetings. Then our conversations grew longer, deeper. I told him about my work at the clinic, about Ellie and our journey. He told me about his years teaching math before becoming a principal, and why he chose to stay in a small town instead of moving to the city. David never asked about the scars on my arms, or why Ellie sometimes woke up screaming in the night. He just listened when I was ready to speak, and sat in silence when I needed space to heal. Ellie's 8th birthday came on a softly snowy day. I'd planned a small gathering in Grace's backyard, but Grace had secretly invited neighbors, my coworkers from the clinic, and even Mr. David and a few teachers from school. Ellie wore a light purple dress, the color she said looked like the sky when I hugged Mommy at sunset. She ran around the yard among laughter, balloons, cake, and bright-colored gift boxes. Her face glowed like winter sunlight. I stood in the kitchen, watching through the window as David knelt to help Ellie retie the scarf slipping from her neck. They were both laughing, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel left behind. After the party, as guests slowly left, David stayed behind to help clean up. I was loading dishes into the sink when he handed me a small envelope. This is a little gift from the school. We do this for all our students who've been through tough times. Nothing big, just a couple movie tickets and a new book. I took the envelope, so moved I nearly teared up. But David didn't leave right away. He stood still for a moment, then looked at me seriously. Bella, I don't know what brought you here, but I do know this. What you and your daughter brought to this place is something truly special. Strength, hope, and kindness. I said nothing, my fingers tightening around the envelope. Do you believe family can be something we create, not just something we're born into? I asked. David didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes, deep and gentle, was a more perfect answer than any words could have been. That night, as I tucked Ellie into bed, she reached for my hand and whispered, "Mom, can I call Mr. David Uncle? He's kind, like he's part of our family." I smiled softly and nodded. "You can call him anything you want, sweetheart, as long as you feel safe and happy." I stood quietly by the bedroom window, watching the snow fall outside the porch. Each white flake drifted down like it was softly covering the traces of everything we'd left behind. And I knew Ellie was right. Family doesn't have to be the people we share blood with. Family is where someone waits for us to step out of the dark, with kindness, patience, and unconditional love. And I had found that kind of family. In Ellie's eyes, in the embrace of friends, and in a man who gently tied a scarf for an 8-year-old girl with all his heart. Our story, Ellie's and mine, isn't just about survival. It's proof that sometimes real family doesn't come from blood, but from the people who choose to love and stay. We lost everything, only to find what truly matters: freedom, peace, and trust. In a world full of uncertainty, I've learned that no matter how dark the past may be, with love and faith, we can rewrite our lives, even from the most shattered pieces. What do you think about Bella and Ellie's journey? Is real family defined by blood or by love and choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and resilience. I took a deep breath, trying to control my emotions as I stood before the executive team of Quantum Innovations, the leading technology corporation where I had dedicated myself for the past 4 years. Project Helios, the most advanced artificial intelligence system I had spent 3 years developing, was finally ready for its crucial investor presentation. After countless long days and sleepless nights, it was time to reap the rewards. My name is Ava Mitchell, 34 years old, lead engineer, and the mind behind the entire design of Helios. I had poured my heart and soul into this project. Every line of code, every algorithm, every aspect of the system bore my mark. Today was supposed to be the day I proudly introduced it to the world. "Impressive, Ava," said Margaret Hayes, the company's CEO, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I was all too familiar with that expression, a sign that something was wrong. However, we need to make a few adjustments before the investor presentation. A chill ran down my spine. Adjustments? I kept my voice calm, though my pulse had quickened. The project has already passed all testing and evaluations. There's nothing left to change. Margaret waved a hand dismissively, as if what I said was irrelevant. I'm not talking about the project, Ava. I glanced around the conference room. Everyone avoided my gaze. Some stared down at their documents while others pretended not to hear. Ryan Carter, the chief technology officer, frowned in confusion, clearly unaware of what was happening. I don't understand, I said, keeping my voice steady. I have led this project from day one. Exactly. Margaret leaned forward, her tone sharp. You've done a great job in development, but for the investor presentation, we need someone with more executive presence. Before I could respond, the conference room doors swung open. A young woman with striking blue eyes and an air of false confidence strode in. Sophie Hayes, Margaret's daughter. A surge of anger rose within me. Sophie had joined the company just 6 months ago as a special consultant, but everyone knew she was only here because of her mother. Sophie will be presenting Project Helios, Margaret announced proudly. She has an MBA from Harvard and the perfect image to attract investors. I clenched my fists under the table, struggling to keep my composure. But she doesn't understand the technology behind this project. This isn't just a sales pitch, it's a groundbreaking AI innovation. Which is why you'll still be involved, Ava, Sophie interjected, her tone dripping with condescension. You'll serve as technical support. The room tilted. 3 years of my life reduced to technical support for someone who didn't even grasp the basics of my work? I lowered my voice, almost whispering, This is ridiculous. Ryan abruptly stood up. Ava is the brain behind this entire project. The investors need to understand the technology, not just hear a rehearsed presentation. Margaret turned to him, her tone sharp. Ryan, this is an executive decision. It's not up for debate. I scanned the room again, waiting for someone to speak up, but no one did. They just looked down, silently accepting the decision. You should be grateful, Sophie smirked. Most companies don't even keep the technical team after a project is completed. And that was the moment I realized I had always known this might happen. I had always known that one day, Margaret would try to steal my work. I took a slow, deep breath, locking eyes with Margaret and Sophie. Did they think I was just an engineer with no power? They had no idea I had been preparing for this day all along. I tightened my grip, staring directly at them. Did they think they could push me aside and take everything I had built? They didn't know that I had anticipated this move. Calmly, I opened my laptop, my fingers gliding over the keyboard. The email was ready. I had written it months ago as a safeguard. Because I knew Margaret would never truly recognize my contributions. With a single click, I sent the email to the entire board of directors, senior advisors, and major shareholders of Quantum Innovations. The message wasn't just a complaint. It contained hard evidence of numerous shady transactions, including internal documents proving that Margaret had sold Helios's confidential data to rival companies. The moment I hit send, a series of notification chimes echoed throughout the room. Every executive in the room checked their phones and laptops. All eyes turned to Margaret. She picked up her phone, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, then to sheer panic. What is this? Margaret blurted out, her voice losing its usual composure. I stood there, unwavering. It's just the truth. Ryan Carter, the chief technology officer, frowned as he read the email. He looked at me, then at Margaret. Margaret, is this true? No one in the room spoke. No one knew what to do as Margaret's entire scheme was exposed right before their eyes. The conference room door swung open again. Robert Lancaster, chairman of the board, entered with 2 lawyers. He was one of the most influential figures in the company, always maintaining a neutral stance. But I knew he had long harbored suspicions about Margaret. I think we need to talk, Robert said in a calm but authoritative voice. Margaret froze for a moment, then quickly regained her composure. Robert, I can explain. This is clearly a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding here, Margaret, I interrupted. All the evidence is in the email. I have also sent copies to the company's legal team. Margaret stiffened. I could see real fear in her eyes. You have no right to do this, Ava, Sophie suddenly spoke up, her voice laced with anger. You're just an engineer. I smiled. Actually, I have more power than you think. I slowly walked to the conference table and placed a folder down. Has anyone ever wondered why I've remained so calm? I looked at Margaret, then at Sophie. Because I've been preparing for this moment for a long time. I opened the folder. On the first page was a stock transfer agreement. Before Henry Foster, the founder of Quantum Innovations, retired, he sold 40% of his shares to me. I emphasized every word, letting it sink in. Margaret turned pale. You're lying. I chuckled. You can check with the legal department if you'd like. Ryan, who now seemed to fully grasp what was happening, looked at me with newfound respect. You own 40% of the shares? That means you have more authority than Margaret? I nodded, and that's not all. I pulled out a USB drive, plugged it into the conference room projector, and a video began to play. On the screen, Henry Foster appeared. Margaret, if you're watching this, it means you have gone too far. I warned you multiple times that this company is not your personal asset. You have abused your power, betrayed the trust of those who believed in you. That is why I entrusted the future of Quantum Innovations to Ava Mitchell. The room fell into absolute silence. Sophie stood motionless, her blue eyes filled with fear. Mom, what is this? Margaret clenched her fists, her gaze burning with fury as she looked at me. But this time, she had nowhere left to run. Robert Lancaster broke the silence. Margaret Hayes, you are immediately suspended from your position. The board will convene an emergency meeting to officially remove you as CEO. Margaret collapsed into her chair. For the first time, she had completely lost control. I turned to Sophie, my voice calm but deliberate. And you? Do you want to come clean, or should we expose everything about you to the compliance board? Sophie opened her mouth, as if about to say something, but then fell silent, her face drained of all color. The emergency meeting took place shortly after, and as I had expected, the outcome was irreversible. Margaret was fired immediately and faced multiple financial misconduct charges. As I stepped out of the conference room, I felt a cool breeze brush past me. Ryan walked up beside me, admiration in his eyes. How long have you been planning this? I smiled. A year. He nodded. Impressive. I simply shrugged. Because this wasn't over. Margaret had been dethroned, but I knew there were still more secrets to uncover. And more importantly, I had to ensure that Quantum Innovations would never fall into the hands of people like her again. Margaret Hayes sat motionless, her face devoid of the power she once commanded. The board had just delivered their final decision. She was terminated immediately and would now face a formal investigation for financial fraud and abuse of power. Robert Lancaster's words, chairman of the board, still echoed throughout the conference room. We cannot allow someone who has exploited this company for personal gain to remain in power. Security entered the room, ready to escort Margaret out of Quantum Innovations headquarters. She stiffened, then suddenly stood up, her eyes filled with fury as she glared at me. Do you think you can defeat me, Ava? Her voice no longer carried its usual artificial composure. You have no idea how many years I've spent building this empire. I remained calm. Building? I repeated, my gaze unwavering. You didn't build anything, Margaret. You merely exploited and manipulated others to maintain control. She let out a bitter chuckle, but I could see the panic in her eyes. You'll regret this, Ava. I crossed my arms, responding gently. You can try, but that won't change the truth. The board's investigation will begin soon, and this time, there's nothing left for you to hide. I saw the flicker of realization in Margaret's eyes. She knew the battle was over. Security stepped forward, instructing her to leave. Margaret jerked her arm away from them, holding her head high as if she was still in control. But no one in the room saw her as a leader anymore. They only saw someone who had lost everything. The moment the conference room doors shut behind her, an eerie silence filled the air. I turned to Sophie Hayes, who had remained motionless, her face pale. "Sophie!" I called her name. She lifted her head, her gaze empty. "Do you have anything to say?" Sophie swallowed hard, her blue eyes darting around the room, now filled with scrutinizing stares. She knew she could no longer protect her mother. "My mother, she told me to do it." Sophie's voice grew quieter, almost a whisper. "I didn't think it would go this far." I met her eyes, my tone no longer cold like when confronting Margaret, but still firm. "You helped her deceive this entire company. Do you understand the consequences of that?" Sophie shuddered. For the first time, the arrogance had disappeared from her face. "I didn't have a choice," she murmured. But I shook my head. "There's always a choice, Sophie. You just took the easiest one." She bit her lip, as if battling her own thoughts. Her entire life, she had lived under her mother's shadow, following every command. And now, with Margaret fallen, she didn't know what to do next. Robert Lancaster looked at Sophie, his voice stern. "The board will be investigating everyone involved in this. If you cooperate, we may consider leniency." Sophie froze. Could she turn against her mother? Or would she cling to the false reality Margaret had built? She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. And then I saw a small but undeniable shift in her expression. She opened them again. "I will cooperate." Sophie spoke slowly but firmly. "I will tell the truth." 3 days later, I sat in my office, gazing out the window at the city below. The official investigation had begun. Margaret faced multiple charges, from financial fraud to abuse of power. And Sophie? She had indeed testified. Her statement became crucial evidence in strengthening the case. Today, Sophie stood before me. Gone were the designer dresses and the smug smile. She was just a young woman who had finally realized how deeply she had erred. "I know. There's no reason for you to forgive me." Sophie's voice trembled slightly. I just wanted to say that I truly regret everything." I studied her for a moment before nodding. "Regret means nothing if you don't do something to change." She swallowed hard, then pulled out a piece of paper and placed it on my desk. "This is a job application." I frowned, glancing at the document. Sophie was applying for a position at the company? "I want to start over," she said, her voice devoid of arrogance, only sincerity. "Not as Margaret Hayes' daughter, but as myself." I looked at her for a long moment. Sophie Hayes, the person who once stood before me and took credit for my work, was now asking for a chance to start over. I considered it, then pushed the application back toward her. "You can work in the marketing department at the lowest position," I stated clearly. "No privileges, no special treatment. If you want to prove yourself, start from the ground up." Sophie nodded. For the first time, I saw that she was no longer looking for shortcuts. I knew this wasn't the end, but at least it could be a new beginning. 3 months later, I stepped into the grand hall of Quantum Innovations, where the official launch of Project Helios was taking place. The massive LED screen displayed impressive numbers, reflecting the overwhelming market interest. The project had exceeded all expectations, becoming one of the greatest breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are not just unveiling a new technological product. We are reaffirming the core values of this company: innovation, integrity, and transparency. Applause filled the auditorium. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the recognition I had fought so hard to earn. Helios was more than just a product. It was proof of what a dedicated, ethical team could accomplish when free from manipulation and personal agendas. Ryan Carter, the Chief Technology Officer, stood beside me, his expression filled with pride. "Ava, you did it!" I looked over at the engineering team, the people who had fought alongside me for 3 years. We did it. I adjusted the microphone and continued my speech. Helios is not the achievement of one individual, but the result of a collective effort. A company cannot grow without trust and ethics. From this day forward, quantum innovations will not only lead in technology, but also in business integrity. The applause returned, louder this time. The shareholders, investors, and employees all understood the company had entered a new era. As I stepped down from the stage, Robert Lancaster was waiting. "That was an excellent speech, Ava." I nodded. "Thank you. But I think there's still unfinished business to take care of." Robert raised an eyebrow. "You mean Margaret?" I smiled, but my eyes were firm. Not long after her termination, Margaret underwent an official investigation for financial fraud and abuse of power. All the evidence my team and I had gathered left no room for denial. When the trial concluded, Margaret was placed under house arrest for 5 years and ordered to pay a significant financial settlement to the company. Once a woman who held immense power, she now had no influence left in the business world. My office door opened and Sophie stepped inside. She no longer carried the arrogance she once had. For the past 3 months, she had worked diligently in the marketing department with no privileges at all. "There's news about my mother," she said quietly. I looked up from my screen, waiting. "I heard that no one wants to work with her anymore. The people who once supported her have all turned their backs." I wasn't surprised. In business, losing credibility means losing everything. "And what about you?" I asked. "What do you think about all of this?" Sophie remained silent for a moment. "I used to think my mother was unstoppable, but now I realize she wasn't as powerful as I believed." I studied her, noticing a genuine shift. No more arrogance, no more entitlement. Just a person learning how to walk the right path. "You've been given a second chance," I said slowly. "Make sure you don't follow in your mother's footsteps." Sophie nodded. This time, I believed she truly understood. I turned back to my screen. Helios was thriving. Quantum Innovations had become a company built on transparency and integrity. Exactly the vision my team and I had fought for. I knew this wasn't the end. But it was the beginning of a new era. An era where people like Margaret Hayes would never have the chance to manipulate their way to the top again. 1 year later, I stepped into the office of Quantum Innovations, gazing through the transparent glass at the city skyline. Helios had become a resounding success, not just in terms of technology, but also in the values it brought to the field of artificial intelligence. But there was one thing I gradually realized. Success wasn't just about the numbers on a report. It was about the culture we were building. Quantum Innovations had once been a company riddled with manipulation, where those with power used connections to climb the ranks without true competence. But now, that had changed. Ryan Carter knocked lightly on my office door. "Ava, there's a new candidate who wants to meet you. I think you'll want to hear his story." I raised an eyebrow and motioned for him to bring the candidate in. A young man, around 24 years old, stepped inside, his eyes filled with determination. He extended his hand and I shook it, sensing the confidence of someone who had fought hard for this opportunity. "I'm Ethan Sullivan, software engineer." I nodded, glancing over his resume on my desk. An impressive background, but without the flashy names like Harvard or MIT. "Ethan, what made you choose Quantum Innovations?" I asked, curious about his real reason for being here. He gave a small smile, but his eyes reflected sincerity. "Because here, talent and integrity matter more than connections." I looked directly at Ethan, feeling the weight of his words. That sentence took me back to my own past, when I was overlooked and pushed aside, simply because I didn't have the right status. "Where did you work before?" I asked. Ethan took a quiet breath, hesitated slightly, then replied. "I worked at a small startup. I developed an algorithm that optimized data processing, but someone else took credit for it." I wasn't surprised. This story was all too familiar. "They pushed you out?" I asked, my tone even. Ethan nodded. "I was just a young engineer without industry connections, but I didn't let that stop me from moving forward." I remained silent for a moment, then stood up. "Ethan, I want you to know one thing. Here, No one is overlooked just because they lack connections. If you do well, you will be recognized. No one can take your work away from you. He clenched his fist slightly, as if realizing he had finally found a place where he truly belonged. Thank you, Ava. That's exactly why I want to work here. After Ethan left my office, I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on my own journey. I had once thought that Helios would be my greatest legacy, but now I understood that true legacy wasn't just about a product. It was about creating an environment where capable people were truly valued, where transparency was the foundation of the company. I thought of Lucas Dawson, the founder of Quantum Innovations, the man who entrusted me with his majority shares. I wondered, if he were here, would he be proud of what I had done? I stood up, stepped outside, and saw groups of young engineers engaged in passionate discussions in the company's open workspace. They weren't people relying on connections to advance. They were people who believed in hard work and integrity. I knew then, this was the legacy I wanted to leave behind. Ava Mitchell's story is not just a battle for justice, it is proof of the power of integrity and perseverance. In a world where power and connections sometimes overshadow true talent, Ava demonstrated that ethics and transparency are the true foundations of lasting success. In reality, many people have been pushed aside and denied credit for their work. But like Ava, if you believe in your worth and keep fighting, you can create change. What do you think of Ava Mitchell's story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar in your career or life? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life, family, and valuable lessons.